Hello again. Last week I mentioned briefly the fact that I used to commute across the Menai Suspension Bridge by bicycle, even when it was quite windy. Although high winds make cycling more tricky, the road going onto the bridge was narrow enough that no overtaking was allowed, and the signage made it quite clear that the only overtaking which was allowed was of bicycles by bicycles. So it felt quite safe, and I could cycle well out into the carriageway. Not like it was on the roundabout on the approach road to the bridge, where I remember being dangerously undertaken on one or two occasions. Cyclists are weird. That may sound like a harsh statement, but what I mean is they're not the social norm. What people expect to see on roads is cars, which is part of the reason why cyclists are so hard to see. We don't expect to see them. So we tell them to have better lights, to have reflective clothing, to wear helmets, because we don't make the effort to see them. The way I said those things probably felt pretty normal, but notice that I used we when I was talking about motorists, and I said they when I was talking about cyclists. The fact that this seems normal is evidence that cyclists aren't the social norm. I've ridden my bike several times since I last drove my car, and it even seemed normal to me. How we use words like us and them is remarkably instructive. It's easy to pin blame on cyclists personally for things, but when it comes to motorists, you'll find people usually talk about cars rather than the people who drive them. It's as if no personal responsibility can be attached to the way they're driven. It's as if they're driverless. And also there seems to be an assumption that people have a right to drive their cars on the road, while you hear complaints of cyclists getting in the way and so on. And this, of course, despite the fact that you do have a legal right to cycle on normal roads, whereas you have to have a special licence in order to drive your car, which also has to have a special certificate. Anyway, this week I heard in the news of research which I think came from an American university, which was presented as a suggestion that cyclists and pedestrians should wear special sensors so actual driverless cars would be less likely to run them over. No, mate. You design your car to avoid crashing into people, please. In fairness, I think the original research was really into systems to make radar more reliable, and I'd guess the wording about having to wear special sensors probably came from a university's PR department wanting to get their institution into the news, successfully as it turned out. But the very idea that the vulnerable, the potential victims in this case, should be the ones to bear the responsibility is surely wrong. It's the powerful, the ones who can do damage, whose responsibility it is not to make other people victims. Strangely, the psychological impact of taking precautions means that precautions don't make you quite as safe as you'd expect. Compulsory seatbelts in cars and helmets on motorbikes and fancy kit like ABS braking systems reduced casualties, but not by as much as was predicted. As has been suggested elsewhere, then perhaps the feature which would make our roads most safe would be a big spike sticking out of the steering wheel of cars. Then everyone would drive cautiously. It's the responsibility of the people who have power, the ones who can do damage, to not make other people victims of their behaviour. And to notice that other people might be fearing becoming victims. Individuals taking precautions in how they live their lives is understandable where there is risk, but the real issue is other people's behaviour which threatens their safety. The trouble is that where there is a societal norm, which we might call privilege, then damaging behaviour is not just excused, it's simply often not noticed by those who have the privilege. It's a bit like car drivers just not noticing cyclists because they're not expecting them to be there. Once a car driver failed to give way to me on a mini roundabout and I nearly ended up underneath his car. Give him his due, he did stop and was clearly shocked himself, though not nearly as much as I was. And what he said to me, he no doubt thought was original. But if you ride a bike, you may well already think you know what he said. Well, not quite. I'd imagine most cyclists have heard a motorist say, "Sorry mate, I didn't see you." Well, what this chap said to me was different. He said, "Sorry, I didn't see you, mate." I'm not proud of my adrenaline-fueled reply, which was nearly, "Well, you should have looked then." It was nearly that, but not quite. Most poor driving when cyclists are around is a mix of ignorance and this lack of expectation that cyclists might be there. But then comes the victim blaming. You should have had brighter lights or reflective clothing. Never, "I should have looked more carefully," or "I should have been driving more slowly so I could stop within my field of vision." Meanwhile, I can go out for walks in the dark without having to consider hiding or running or how I might fight back. One of my favourite stories of Jesus is one which, it turns out, is a bit of a problematic one. It's one which is problematic as a text. It's not clear where it really belongs in the Bible, or even really if it does belong. We generally have it at the beginning of John chapter 8, though it may well fit better in Luke. It's the story of the woman caught in adultery, which gives us the proverbial question about casting the first stone. Jesus seems to realise that whatever wrongdoing there was went wider than the case at hand. He wasn't afraid to point out what was wrong, but seems to know that that maybe wasn't really the point. The test was whether he would say that the woman should be executed, as was the tradition from the Jewish laws, but which would not have been permitted under Roman law. But Jesus effectively responds with, "Why are you picking on her?" And in our reading of the text, which is informed by our society's norms and probably also by a tradition of interpretation by people with privilege, we miss another question. So much of the Bible is written from a male perspective and for a male perspective. And so often it's been interpreted for us almost exclusively from a male perspective and from a position of male privilege, such that other perspectives are simply not noticed. The old Jewish law said that both people caught in adultery should be executed. We refer to this story as the woman caught in adultery. But you can't be caught in adultery on your own. I'm a white, male, middle-class, middle-aged, well-educated person. All I have going against me in terms of privilege is that I'm Northern, I went to a state school, and in a church context, I'm not Anglican. I have a lot to learn. I hope I can notice, and I'm willing to listen. God bless. See you soon.